We have been working through some messages about why believe? Why should we follow God? Is there a God? How do we know there's a God? And so we've kind of talked about the idea last week, especially, how do we know there's a God? One of the reasons is that we have this kind of, thank you guys very much, we have this internal sense of right and wrong. If you recall, there was a phone that got thrown against the wall last week. I don't know who would do something like that. That's just crazy. But he grabbed his phone. That's funny. That is funny. It was a total setup, but everyone here knew that there was something that happened wasn't right. I cannot believe that phone got destroyed. Setup, but there's this idea that we know there's this moral code. And if there's a moral code, there has to be a moral code giver. We've also talked about the fact that there is just evidence, the 100, 200,000 galaxies, that there is a maker. The very eye, the complexities of life, they all point to a maker, to a God. And so the question I want to kind of pose today and in the next couple of weeks is, if there is a God, how do I know that we are serving the right one? How do we know that your view is the right view? They can't all be true. There can only be one truth. So just because I say that this is my God doesn't make it true. There has to be some evidence to why I believe that this microphone stand is my God, right? So just my belief doesn't make it so. So there has to be belief based upon some kind of evidence. The fact is that there are many varying beliefs or views of the nature of God. Some of them is like polytheism. Polytheism means many gods. And so the Canaanites served many gods like Baal, the god of fertility, and ensured good crops. There's the goddess Anat, who was another fertility goddess. The Philistine people, they lived on a narrow strip of land between Judah and the Mediterranean Sea. Their chief god was Dagon, but they had many different gods. And so the problem, honestly, that the Israelites had is they would go to this new culture, this new area, and instead of just serving their God, they would start to kind of, everybody else, this was crazy. Everybody else had a little statue god. I want a statue god too. And so they had a statue god. I want a statue god. So they would start making these idols and things that they would worship so they could see it with their eyes. But that was one of the big issues for the Israelites, was all of these people around them, all their multiple gods, and repeatedly their God was saying, hey, there's only one, Yahweh. There's only one God. There's only one God. And that was the issue if you read Old Testament of what was happening. Pantheism. Pantheism is the view that God is nature and that nature is God. And so you have this idea that God is not personal at all. As a matter of fact, God is kind of everywhere in nature. The tree is God, the light's God, the sun's God, and they're all gods. And you find this a lot of Native American communities and also in African communities of this idea that we would call pantheism. Pan, God is everything that's God. Deism was another popular view, especially at the start of our nation. It's the view that there is a God who's very intelligent, he's very smart, if you will, but essentially he created the heavens and the earth, and then he took a wind-up clock, and he just wound that thing up, and he said, here you are, and he walked away. And so needless to say, there's no personal God at all. And so which one's right? Which one do we follow? How do we know? And the difficulty with even that is all of them say there's a different path to truth. They can't all be right. Is that right? Are you following me? Like, they cannot all be right. They can't all be true. So how do you know which one is true? How do you work through that? Listen to some of the claims. So Hinduism, which is one of the most popular religions, believes has one true God, a spirit being called Brahman, but they also have 300 million other little gods. And so for Hinduism, one life is passed on through reincarnation and reincarnation over and over again. Karma, Sometimes we joke around, that's karma. Well, that's very real for a Hindu. And so for karma, that means that if something happened to you, you're just getting what you deserve. Maybe you did something 3 lifetimes ago and you've been reincarnated, and now you got a really bad place, which is one reason why they have the caste system in culture. Because if you're in this system, it's because you were bad before. Maybe in the next lifetime you get a different one. Anyway, that's Hinduism. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, born in royalty in Nepal around 600 BC. He, through enlightenment, thought that he became the Buddha, the teacher, the inspiration. And for Buddhism, essentially, there's no personal God. Very popular world religion, but you're seeking nirvana. You're seeking this place of enlightenment, that you're trying to reach this. That would be Buddhism. Islam, we're very familiar with, especially in the last 15, 20 years. Religious system that began in the 7th century by Muhammad. Muhammad was to have had a dream with the angel Gabriel, and the angel Gabriel was supposed to have given him, this vision, and he took him on kind of this trip, and out of that came the Quran and so forth. But again, a whole different view of life, as we know, and what the world looks like. Judaism, we would be familiar with Judaism for the most part, I hope. Judaism would say one personal God. Of course, they don't accept Jesus Christ as God, and they're still trying to wait for their hope, their Messiah. There's cults galore. Cults. Jim Jones, anybody? Right? Who's the guy from Waco? David Koresh. Cults, man, their views vary across the board. Anywhere from there's alien gods, and I'm hoping to be taken away by aliens, to you are a god. Mormonism. The basis of Mormonism is you are a god. Cults. So what about Christianity? Christianity bases its belief on the person of Jesus Christ, who claimed to be God in the flesh, sent to redeem humanity. So this is where it becomes different. Every other source of religion, every other faith source, religious source, tries to take you to a place where somehow you please God. You're trying to bring you to enlightenment, or bring you to godhood, or bring you to alienhood, or whatever it is. But they're trying to bring you someplace that maybe perhaps you will please the gods, or you will get their blessing. Christianity is the only belief system that says God came to you. That in time and space 2,000 years ago, a man by the name of Jesus Christ, who claimed to be not just a man, but claimed to be God himself, came and walked among us and said, hey, listen, I am not just a formulation of truth, but he said, I am truth. I am God. And I am the only way to salvation. So in Christianity, you have God coming to you and reaching you. Whole different view. So again, how do you know which one's true? How do you know which one to believe? Again, they cannot all be true. If I say to you, we're going to California, and you say to me, I'm going east, and you say to me, I'm going west, and you say to me, I'm going south, and you say to me, I'm going north, how many know that no matter how genuine you are in trying to get to California, you're not getting there? Good intentions don't get you to California, where there's no snow and 70 degrees and sunny. Anyway, heaven's going to be like that. That's all I'm saying. Heaven's going to be like that. But just because you're sincere in your belief doesn't make your belief right. You have to know the direction you're going. I'm taking this way. My aim is to California. This is the path that we have to take. Let me follow this a little bit further. So how do we know what to believe? Look at the evidence. Hinduism at its start is very difficult to trace because essentially it was a cultural belief within their community with many gods, and Hinduism really is just kind of there's different pockets of what that looks like, and it's kind of transformed over time. But it has some sacred books, the Vedas, written by sages. And so for Hinduism, if you were in India today and they said, why are you a Hindu? You would say essentially because my parents were. That's what my culture believes. That's just what I believe. Well, but okay, outside of that, how come you're not a Buddhist or a Christian? Because this is what my parents believe. This is what I grew up. In other words, it's just a faith. It's just a faith belief based upon tradition or culture, but not based upon some kind of evidence that you can look at outside of personal experience. Another one, Buddhism. As we said, Buddhism started by Siddhartha Gautama, who reached enlightenment, became the Buddha. The Buddhist canon consists of some sutras, the words and teachings of Buddha. Same thing. Buddha dies, right? He's dead. He's trying to teach you this is the way to enlightenment. Why are you a Buddhist? I don't know. It just feels good. Is there some good teaching Buddhism? Absolutely. But why are you Buddhist? I don't know. I don't know. It just seems to be today is kind of cool. We don't call it Buddhism. We call it other things today, like Zen Buddhism. It sounds more hip. But that's kind of popular today. But so why would you be a Buddhist? Why would you believe that? I don't know. It just kind of feels right. Islam started, Muhammad received special revelation. I shared that before. But even look at Judaism. It's interesting how Judaism defended itself in this culture. Judaism did two things. It always pointed back to an event in their belief. Follow me with this thing. So when Judaism, when they come to the people of Canaan or wherever, and they're trying to tell them about their God, they don't say things like just believe. They don't say things like just have faith. What they do is they go back to, hey, listen, you know this happened. We were in Egypt, and we were slaves. God brought, Yahweh brought plagues, set us free, parted the Red Sea. Like, you know this happened, right? Yes. And so what they always did is they always pointed back to moments when God, Yahweh, intervened in history, and they would essentially say, what did your God do for you? Or, my God brought rain. Really? Like, because we have rain all the time. Anyway. But so that's how they did it. As a matter of fact, maybe you remember the story when I think it's Elijah. Elijah's on Mount Carmel, and he essentially, there's this big thing happened between the prophets of Baal and God and Elijah and Jezebel. And so they get in this mountain, and he says, hey, listen, let's just see whose God is real. Let's just do it by, experience. Let's see what happens. And so he says, I'll build my little sacrifice. I'll build my altar, and then you build your altar, and then you call down fire or call down things. And if your gods bring down fire to your altar, you win. I'll serve your God. But if my God, if he brings down fire, we're in trouble, right? And so, but you see this happening a lot in the Old Testament of how they're kind of showing their God is the real God and not just one of their many idols that people kind of worship, man-made idols. But you'd have to look at the Old Testament for that. So what about Christianity? How do we know that Christianity is legit, real, true, valid outside of our experience? We all have experience with Jesus, I'm assuming, right? If you're a Christian, how many have had some experience with Jesus? Right? So you've been healed, something happened in your life. You remember a time when, man, God just changed my life. There's no other way I could deal with this outside of experience. And those experiences are important, but to the atheist or the agnostic or the person that doesn't believe, it's kind of meaningless to an extent because it's your experience. And so how does the believer share, how does the Christian share their faith with people that simply, two different areas. Either they're a non-believer or they're an agnostic, and so they simply don't believe at all. Or, and I would say perhaps worse yet, is those that claim to be following Christ but simply are not. So they're a name only but not an action. And so the question would be, how do we share and empirical and evidence for our faith that's not just based upon experience. And that's what we want to go through now in the next couple of weeks. All the other religions claimed to lead you to a place of enlightenment. They claimed to lead you to a place of higher understanding. Jesus claimed to be God in the flesh. I'm not leading you to enlightenment, I'm leading you to me. You can only get to my Father through me. One God, 3 persons, what we call the Trinity. That's a powerful statement. He said, I have come to seek and save those that are lost. I come after you. I come to get you. How do I know it's true? How do I know it's true? Here's what's interesting. I'm going to look at it. And I wish I would have put these up on a PowerPoint, especially considering that, half of you are at home. I wish I would have put these up here, but I didn't. I'm sorry. If you want to look at a couple passages, I'm looking at Acts chapter 1, verse 1. And I'm just going to stay there real briefly because I'm just going to show 4 verses of how early Christians, if you will, shared their faith, how they did it. And so if you don't have a Bible and you want to turn there, there's a great Bible in front of you. It's page 1403. 1403, the book of Acts. And I'm going to look at 2 from the book of Acts. The Acts of the Apostles is just that. I'll just go ahead and start what Luke says. Luke says, in my former book, Theophilus, and so he wrote, of course, the book of Luke, the gospel, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and to teach, until the day he was taken up to heaven after giving instructions through the Holy Spirit to the apostles he had chosen. But then Luke does something really interesting. As he's sharing the story, we believe he's trying to reach this Theophilus. We think he's one of the leaders, and he's trying to show Theophilus the works of God and how he's working. But here's what he does. He doesn't go to Theophilus, hey, listen, you just need to have some faith. You just need to believe. He never says blindly believe in this Christ. What he does is he points to evidence that can be looked at. So he says this, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and to teach until the day he was taken up to heaven after giving instructions to the Holy Spirit to the apostles he had chosen. Verse 3, after his suffering, he presented himself to them. So what Luke does is he says, listen, what happened to Jesus is in your knowledge base. It's in your background. It's in your area. In other words, he says, when Jesus came, he died, but he rose again, and then he presented his new body to people, to them, the people around you. Acts would have been written within the same culture of those when Jesus would have died and risen again. So in other words, hey, if you don't believe me that this Jesus who claimed to be God actually rose from the dead, go talk to them. Go talk to them. Go talk to the leaders, the disciples, the other Jewish people, the people that crucified him. Go talk to them. So he puts what you would call, and he puts a supernatural event on time and space and history and says, just look at it for what it is. Let me go on. He presented himself to them, giving, you don't have it in front of you, but it says many convincing proofs. So he just didn't show up, but he's like, hey, look at my hands. Touch them. Go ahead, Thomas. Like, touch my hands, touch my body. He ate with them. We don't know all the convincing proofs, but we know some of them. So he ate with them. He hung out with them. He said, touch them. I'm God. I rose from the dead just as I said I would to pay for the sins of humanity. He presented himself to them, gave many convincing proofs that he was indeed alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days. So this isn't like Muhammad, I had a vision from Gabriel, and he spoke to me. No. God walked among hundreds and thousands of people, and when he rose from the dead, he came back and showed himself to hundreds of people. This isn't a one-person experience. This is open for everybody. Does that make sense at all? Let me move on. Acts chapter 3. So a couple of chapters later, if you want to turn there, that's up to you. Page 1409. Acts chapter 3, verse 12. Acts chapter 3, verse 12 through 15. Peter is essentially explaining some things that happened, and they're wondering, how do I get saved? What do I need to do with this? The beggar, remember, gets saved. So here's what he says. He says, listen, the God of Abraham, you know this God, Isaac and Jacob, the God of our fathers, has glorified his servant Jesus. And then look at this. You handed him over to be killed. That's not nice evangelism, right? Like in your history of evangelism, that would be like, that's not very nice. You killed him. You did this. So again, he doesn't point to just believe or just have faith. He says, listen, you did it. You were there. You killed him. He goes on. If that's not hard enough, you handed him over to be killed. You disowned him before Pilate. Pilate, a person in history, not this make-believe person in a faraway galaxy, but Pilate. You know Pilate. You disowned him before Pilate, though he had decided to let him go. You, verse 14, you disowned the holy and righteous one and asked that a murderer be released. Again, this is in public, so anybody can say, was there really a murder that was released? Yep, there was. Okay. You asked for a murderer to be released. You killed the author of life, but God raised him from the dead. And then listen to even the last phrase. We, you and me, are all witnesses. We all saw it. You can choose to believe it or not believe it, but you can't deny the facts. Let me give you another one. 1 John chapter 1, page 1680, and this is, again, I'm going to go through real quick. Page 1680, 1 John chapter 1, verse 1. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched. That's crazy. So he's writing, 1 John, hey, listen, that which was from the beginning, God. You've heard about him, you've seen him, and many of us even touched him. This truth we proclaim to you, that life appeared, and we have seen it and testified to it. Verse 3, we proclaim to you what we have seen and what we have heard. And in other words, over and over again, John says, listen, don't just believe this thing because, on your experience, just don't believe it because it feels good. He says, no. Man, listen, talk to somebody. You've seen it, you touched it, you heard it, all what we would call empirical facts or historical facts. And finally, the last one, maybe you want to look at sometime, is 1 Corinthians 15:5. He says, hey, Jesus appeared to Cephas or Peter, then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brothers at once, most of whom are still alive. Some had fallen asleep. So again, over and over again, he says, look at this, look at this, look at this. That's different than any other religion. No other religion comes to you and says, just test it. Just test it. Just, check it out. Go find out the places that Muhammad went to. And there's no truth within the Quran that you can test to verify that what happened. It's all kind of what you would call spiritualism. Or Buddhism is all good just teachings, but it doesn't put you in space and time and history looking at everyday facts that you can investigate. I said last week that I was an atheist, and it was this, as we're going to go for the next few weeks, that it was this teaching about Jesus Christ being a person of history that caused me to come to faith. It's this that I could articulate in time and space and history. Whether I believed it or not was up to me, but I could point back to that 2,000 years ago, some dude named Jesus definitely indeed walked on this earth. He did signs and wonders and miracles, and he rose from the dead. Now, I can choose how I want to respond to that, but you can't deny the facts. So why does that make a difference? It makes a difference in twofold. Again, because number one, our responsibility as believers is to know why we believe what we believe. I need to be able to articulate to those that don't believe why you follow Christ instead of being an atheist or an agnostic or being a Buddhist or being a Hindu or an Islam or some cult. Why do you follow Christ? You need to know why you believe. And I would say especially as the times get more and more difficult, because they're going to be tough. Can you share why you believe? Number two, I will go back to this, because there's seasons in our life, something I just went through recently. There are seasons in your life where you will doubt, maybe not the existence of God, but you will doubt the goodness of God, as Angie shared, maybe the favor of God or the nature of God. There's going to be seasons where you struggle, and especially in those seasons, you're going to need to shut off your emotion for the moment and your hurt for the moment and come back to something that's solid. I don't completely understand everything that happened in my life, but I know in 2,000 years ago, in time and space and history, this guy, the name Jesus Christ, claimed to be God. He did miracles, signs, and wonders. He died, he rose again. My hope is in that, even when my world is falling apart. That's why it matters. It matters. As a matter of fact, a very well-known atheist who's the president of the American Atheist Association, Ellen Johnson, was on CNN with Larry King, and she writes, she was spoken and said, hey, listen, there is not one shred of secular evidence that there was ever a Jesus Christ. She said, not one. Jesus is a compilation from other gods who have the same origins, the same death. He's a mythological Jesus Christ. Larry King said, so you don't believe that Jesus Christ was real? Ellen Johnson replied, fired back, there is no secular evidence whatsoever that Jesus Christ ever existed. Is that true? Oh my gosh, no. We can't go back and talk to the 500 people that were there. We can't go back because, it's 2,000 removed. But there is historical evidence and writings and archaeological digs and all kinds of stuff that point back to re-say what, in other words, just like, Abraham Lincoln lived, even though you can't see him, because of his story, because of people that wrote about him, we know the same thing about Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis, C.S. Lewis was a well-known atheist Oxford scholar prior to becoming a Christian, and he talks about his conversion this way. He was sitting by the fire in an Oxford dorm room when a friend, he called, quote, the hardest boiled atheist of all the atheists I had ever known. Suddenly his friend blurted out, the evidence for the historicity of the historical evidence of the Gospels was really surprisingly good. It almost looks as if this really happened. That phrase struck C.S. Lewis with such a great degree that he was stunned, and he did the investigation himself. Out of that investigation, he wrote the book Mere Christianity. Have you read Mere Christianity? A great book. I would encourage you to read it. But the evidence is overwhelming. The emotional evidence is overwhelming. The miracle is overwhelming. But the historical evidence from non-believers is overwhelming that Jesus Christ lived, died, rose again in time and space and history. And for just the next 5 minutes, I want to show you just a few of those. This last November, we went to Israel, and we're planning on going either this November or next November, probably both. If you're interested, you need to let me know. You can just email me at office@newlife906.com. If you haven't already told me you want to go, office@newlife906.com. But if you go to Palestine today, you're going to find a place called Bethlehem. There's my wife, Monica, wearing the cool shades. You see on the right, birthplace of Jesus, Church of the Nativity. Anybody heard of Bethlehem? Right? Yeah. So we're not positive that this is the right Bethlehem. There's a couple Bethlehems in the Bible. But we know Bethlehem is very, very real. It isn't this land out in the middle of nowhere on 3 heavens ago. No. Like you can walk there, man. Like your feet. You can taste, touch, and smell. I wouldn't encourage tasting it. Like, don't lick the brick, but you can. You can do that. I mean, it's there. It's historical evidence. Archaeological, they dig it up. We'll keep going on. How about this? Anybody know what this is? This is the Sea of Galilee. It's not photoshopped. I didn't make it up. If you go to Israel, there is a real Sea of Galilee. Just like the Bible says there is. This is the place that Jesus walked on water. I tried, I failed. It's the place where, they drop the fish in and pull the fish out, the nets. It's the place that when they're trying to pay taxes, Jesus says, go and they get that coin out of a fish's mouth. Like whether you believe in what happened is irrelevant at this point, but is this place for real? Yep. You can go there and check it out yourself. No one debates historical evidence for Jesus Christ. No one does, unless you're an absolute shutting off your brain. Next to the Sea of Galilee is Christ's childhood town called Nazareth. Yeah, you can go there today. It didn't look like that, but this is not a made-up town. This is the real deal. This is Nazareth. This is it. It's just fascinating to anybody else. Like the place that Jesus walked, who claimed to be God in the flesh, like you can go there too. To me, that's just mind-blowing. This, if you ever heard of Capernaum, you probably haven't. Maybe you have. Once you read the stories, you will. But Capernaum is a place that Peter lived. It's a place that Jesus goes in a synagogue. A man that was had an unclean spirit. Jesus delivers him. So you go to Capernaum, and here's the synagogue, just like the Bible explains it. I mean, okay, this is half of it, right? I mean, it was bigger than, this is the rubble of it, but it's archaeological dig. They pulled it up just like it's real places. So when the Bible talks about a synagogue in Capernaum that Jesus went to heal somebody, you can go there. Again, taste, touch, feel, smell. How about, this is even kind of cool, Peter's house. Your house looks pretty nice now, doesn't it? But you can look, this, Jesus healed, I think it was Peter's mother, I believe it was, there, here, right there. Again, archaeological evidence. We're not just believing this Jesus of, he's far out there. No. You go walk where you walk. Check it out. Go look at it. Just as the Bible says, there's a Sea of Galilee right next to it. There's my beautiful wife, Monica, trying to walk on water. She didn't make it. She's very disappointed. And so it's there. You see, right there, there's Galilee, just Sea of Galilee, just like as Jesus is walking and talking, he's sharing all these things. It's there. You see it with your eyes. So again, our faith isn't just this blind faith that we just have to believe blindly, but there's evidence for what we believe. I could go on and on. This would be, we went to Bethesda, where Jesus heals a blind man, Caesarea Philippi, Cursta, the Mount of Beatitudes. This is Jerusalem. No, it's not. This is Jerusalem. It's my wife and I. Again, overlooking Jerusalem. There it is. It's a real place. It's not fictional. It's not Nirvana, right? It gets real. By the way, if you're a believer, you're going to spend a long time in Jerusalem when Jesus comes back. So just saying, call it home. You can look at the Kidron Valley. You can look at the old temple. This is the walls surrounding Jerusalem. This is the steps on the southern side of Jerusalem. Like the bottom ones that don't look real pretty, those are the real steps that Jesus walked on. It's all real. It's all there. That should encourage your faith. Does it at all? Somebody help me. Even if you have to lie. No, I'm just kidding. Don't lie. But you can go on to the Pool Bethesda. This is where Jesus went down and healed the lame man. And yeah, there's no water there, but you can walk around. This is it. It's not debatable. You can go across the Kidron Valley, this is the garden, right? The place where Jesus it probably didn't look exactly like this, but that's where it was. I'm just saying that the evidence is overwhelming. Overwhelming. Next week, we're going to continue to talk about, did people talk about Jesus? What did they have to say? People that weren't believers, what did they say about Jesus? I mean, did they talk about him? Because that should help us our faith a little bit, right? What did they say? What did non-believer say about this Christos? What did they say? We'll look at that next week. But I do hope, I hope that this helps your faith. Even on a snowy day in April, tax day, April 15th, I hope this helps your faith. If you're searching, that's one of my new words. If you're searching, you're seeking, or you're not sure why you believe, there's a book I would encourage called either Evidence That Demands a Verdict or Why We Believe by Paul Little. Both of those are in the resource counter by the coffee shop. So take a look at that.